What story do you really want to tell, but no one has asked the right question for you to bring it up? A few years ago, I was working at a pretty miserable place. When I got off work, it had begun to rain, and I had no umbrella. The crosswalk was red, and there wasn't any shelter from the rain nearby. So I just stood there getting soaked, desperately wishing I could be home. A couple of drunk middle-aged dudes came up waiting to cross the street. I didn't look them in case they got rowdy, but one of the men looked at me and handed me his umbrella. I tried to refuse, but he said, "Your head is more precious than mine." Then the light turned green, and he stumbled along, sharing his friend's umbrella. It was a simple and incredibly kind gesture that made me feel like I mattered. I still have the umbrella, and I'll never forget the moment a drunk old man cheered me up during a dark time. I also hope he didn't regret losing the umbrella after he sobered up. It was a really nice one. A few years ago, I stopped at a post office in one of those towns that claims it would be the murder capital of America if anyone actually knew it existed. In the parking lot, I was approached by a seemingly sane man who, without much context, gave me a copy of a book he'd written. I saw he had stacks of this book in the back of his old Camry, so I figured he was just excited to share his work with everyone who came to the post office parking lot that day. The book was called Code 205 Part 1. It's not just a code, but also a way of life by Grimy Jones. That is not an exaggeration. You can look it up. It was published by an organization that helps inmates self-publish books while incarcerated. The About the Author section, across from a full-page advertisement for his friend's rap hip-hop mixtape, had a nice picture of Ole, Grimy, and a description of his ambition to inspire others and make his family and friends proud through his writing. It was as if God himself had brought Grimy to me as a divine sign of the crossroads I had reached in my life. The book was a symbol for the choice laid before me, where I could choose to push myself toward my and Grimy's goal, or continue to cower behind excuses and self-doubt. With it in my hands, my passion burned and my hope soared. I felt I owed it to Grimy to finish his book, regardless of the quality, and then begin my own writer's journey. Upon actually reading it, I discovered that Grimy had written more or less a series of disturbing, pornographic vignettes in his own personal brand of English. The titular Code 205 is apparently a prison code for an inmate engaging in high-risk sexual acts, such as the slightly autobiographic main character masturbating to the female corrections officers. According to Grimy, these actions are offensive because it makes the female officers feel sad about how inadequate their boyfriends and husbands are when they see some nice prison meat. I gave the book a real effort, got to the part where the released main character jizzes in a McDonald's fryer after receiving a gummy blowjob from a grandma with her dentures out, and promptly threw the book in the trash. My grandfather was working on a U.S. Navy base during World War II as a welder, civilian, when he got his draft letter. He took it to the admiral on base to let him know that he'd be leaving. The admiral called FDR and explained that my grandfather was the best welder he had, and that his effort towards the war would be better served if he stayed, working in his current role. My family still has the letter from the president to my grandfather, commending him for his work and excusing him from the draft, so long as he continued working at the base. My grandmother's house had a row of peony bushes in the landscaping. They were in full bloom, deep pink and white, and you could smell them across the yard. My grandma was busy hanging sheets on the clothesline. The peonies smelled so tempting that 6-year-old me just couldn't resist. I walked over to the peonies. My grandma yelled not to pick them, and I leaned over and took a big, exaggerated whiff. I felt something that can only be described as what it would feel like if bugs were crawling all over my nose and throat and getting into my mouth, because they were. The peony I smelled so deeply was covered in ants. What must have been 50 ants flew up my nose and down my throat. This is a story from a through hike I went on this past summer. I was over 3 weeks into a month-long hike, and I was starting to have major motivation problems. It was a rainy day, and I decided, fuck it. I'm not gonna wear any rain gear because you just get hot in addition to being soaked. I climbed to the top of a lookout point and met a man with his 2 teenage children. He's super funny and nice, and we hit it off and chat for a bit. He asks me about what I'm eating and how my hike is going. After weeks of being mostly solo, most of the time, it's so good to talk with a good conversation partner. But it's storming and we're high up, so we shortly part ways. Anyways, the next day of my hike is brutal. My gear is still damp and my body was not holding up as well as I hoped. I'm fatigued to my core and I want to be done. But I'm determined to go 15 miles anyways, one of my longer days. Mile 11 to 13 are a beach walk portion. I thought, great, that'll be fun. Absolutely not. Walking through tiny beach rocks in hiking boots with a 40-pound back is hard as fuck. I dumped a full cup of rocks out of my shoes afterwards. I get to the end of the walk, and there's a little bridge leading back towards the woods. On the bridge, there's a sign that says, lowest elevation point of the SHT. SHT being the trail. And I'm thinking to myself, I get it. Today is the worst day. God damn it, SHT. You bitch. You really know how to kick someone when they're already down. So I keep going and I make it to a road crossing with trail signs on either side. And on the near sign, I see a gas station bag full of goodies. In my head, I'm thinking simultaneously, no way, and that it has to be for me. I get up close to it and in permanent marker, all caps, it says my very uncommon first name. I was speechless. Inside there was a full-sized bag of kettle chips, a 24-aughts Coke, an apple, and an orange. The kindly man I spoke to asked me what food I missed most and how far I was going. I said potato chips and 15 miles. He delivered. Best day on the trail. I don't usually drink pop, but that Coke, still a little cold, was maybe the best thing I ever tasted. TLDR, I was having a really bad stretch of days on a through hike, and a kind stranger gave me an amazing, surprising gift and made my day. My grandfather was committed for alcoholism in the 1940s and stayed several years in a psychiatric hospital. Fast forward 60 years, and I'm touring that hospital for work reasons, as I was part of the team planning its replacement. I heard horror stories of how patients were treated in the past. I never told anyone my grandfather was one of those patients. I feel like a dork, but here goes. I didn't know what periods were until I had them. So when I was bunking a class when I was 10, I told my teacher I had a stomachache and she asked me if I had periods, to which I said, the next period is social studies. And she asked again and I said the last period was the science period. She said Nvem and told me to go off. The same year when we were going for a trip from school, when the guide teacher told us we had to take pads, I asked why we had to bring writing pads to my friend. She said sanitary pads, and I said, IDK about y'all, but my exam pad is pretty clean. I was living in Madison, WI, and driving home from work one day. Traffic was horrible, and I was just constantly looking in the rearview mirror because I'm always afraid someone is going to rear-end me. But instead, I saw a man in the driver's seat beating the ever-loving shit out of his passenger. I tried honking my horn loudly to get his attention. Didn't work. So I slowed down so that he would have to pay attention to the road. Also didn't work. And he sped around me and got in front of me. I could tell he was still hitting and punching that woman, so I called the police and told them his license plate number. He sped off onto the interstate before I could describe him super well, but I told them the direction he was going. I hang up and continue on my way home. A few miles down, like 4 or 5 exits, I see 3 or so police cars with their lights going. I was like, oh shit, wonder what's going on. And as I pass, I see it's the car. They had the guy in handcuffs, and the police were checking on a very bloodied woman. I still think about her. I really hope she is okay and that she took that opportunity to get out of whatever situation she might have been in. My great-grandfather lived in Kansas when the Dust Bowl hit the US. He and his wife lived in a really small town, and he owned the grocery store. After he passed away, my family was going through the stuff in his house and found a box of letters he had hidden from everyone. Every letter was a thank you from different families he helped during the Dust Bowl. People would be running from the Dust Bowl and pass through his town. He would give them free food to last them until they reached their destinations. Many of the letters thanked him for saving their lives and stuff like that. He took this secret to the grave, literally. Not even his wife knew. I've heard mention that maybe she wouldn't have been quite as pleased, but I don't know about that. I just think that's super cool, and I'm very proud of him. I have a lot of weird stories about my family that I never get to tell. Haha. Edit. I didn't realize people would be so interesting in this. Kind of thought it was just a personal family pride thing. Thank you all for your ideas regarding preserving these memories. I will absolutely look into that. I'll have to touch base with my dad and see if we know who ended up with those letters. Most of my other stories are my grandpa being a dumb teenager in rural Kansas, and think about how I would have never gotten away with that stuff. Haha. I'll have to talk to my dad and see if he has any other stories about my great-grandpa. The town is in northern Kansas. I'm pretty sure the population is under 500 people, and they have a town museum, which is adorable. I've been there once. Literally has some grammar mistakes. Thank you everyone for explaining what the Dust Bowl is. Look up pictures. It's crazy. When I was 13 for Christmas, my grandparents bought paintball game passes for everyone my age and older in my family, about 15 of us. One year, we had to play with a bunch of strangers as one very large group, and we all got divided into 2 random teams for a game of capture the flag. Well, all these strangers we were playing with turned out to be assholes and poor sports. They were just cheating and not going out when they got shot. My family is all very fun and competitive, so it did not go unnoticed, and we all talked shit about it in between rounds. We all promised each other we would specifically target the strangers for being assholes in the last round. So it's finally the last round. We are divided E. The town is in northern Kansas. I'm pretty sure the population is under 500 people, and they have a town museum, which is adorable. I've been there once. Literally has some grammar mistakes. Thank you everyone for explaining what the Dust Bowl is. Look up pictures. It's crazy. When I was 13 for Christmas, my grandparents bought paintball game passes for everyone my age and older in my family, about 15 of us. One year, we had to play with a bunch of strangers as one very large group, and we all got divided into 2 random teams for a game of capture the flag. Well, all these strangers we were playing with turned out to be assholes and poor sports. They were just cheating and not going out when they got shot. My family is all very fun and competitive, so it did not go unnoticed, and we all talked shit about it in between rounds. We all promised each other we would specifically target the strangers for being assholes in the last round. So it's finally the last round. We are divided into random teams of mixed strangers and family, and I'm a petite 13-year-old girl ready to kick some ass. Halfway through the round, I see a guy on the other team belly crawling towards my half of the field. I had a narrow window to shoot at him, and I took it. Pop. Right on his back. I can see the paint splatters. And of course, he doesn't get up and pretends he just didn't get shot, I guess. One of those assholes. So I shoot again. Pop, pop, square on the back, clear as day. He is out, but he still doesn't surrender. Pop, pop. I don't miss a single shot. He barely moves. He just starts crawling forward again, so I just let him have it. Pop, 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 pop. Wait, pop, pop, pop. Wait, pop, pop, pop. I pretty much empty my barrel of paintballs on his back. Finally, I have to stop, and he slowly rolls over and turns around, sulking back to his end of the field like the sore loser he was. We finished the game, and I don't even remember who won. We were all tired and sore and bruising. The next day, my family is talking in the group chat about all of their bruises and welts. My aunt texts, "I bet Uncle's name won the contest for most welts. He has like 30 on his back because some ass wouldn't stop shooting him, and he couldn't get up fast enough because of his bad knee." To this day, I haven't admitted that was me. I had no idea it was my poor uncle.